Today I'm having coffee with Chad Goodman. He's a young conductor from San Francisco who's currently a conducting fellow at the New World Symphony in Miami, Florida. Chad and I have a mutual friend who told me about some of his videos on YouTube and his Facebook videos with practical advice for conductors and other musicians. So I cold called him and I'm going to have coffee with him right now. Hi, Chad. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me on this program. I'm really excited to chat with you.
Really nice to meet you. And most of my guests are friends of mine and people I've worked with before, but I've started lately reaching out to people for the first time. And so here it is, that cold call coffee talk. Speaking of coffee, I'm a regular espresso drinker, so I've got my double shot like every day. Do you have any favorite morning beverage with you?
So I am just drinking a simple coffee with a little bit of milk. There's a Lavazza Gran Selezione Arabica. It's just something simple. I'm honestly have always been was more of a tea drinker, and coffee was, and it still is to this day. I drink coffee more frequently now, but it's always been like a reward for myself. Like if I have like a double, or if I have a double rehearsal or something, the break in between, I get lattes. That's it. I love going out and getting a really nice latte from a great, local coffee shop, but I'm not someone who, obsesses over making it at home, and I can still like function without it. I don't need it to wake up. It's just sort of like an added little bonus if I choose to have some. So,
Right.
yeah.
I also say that I don't need it to function, but if I don't have one, I get a headache. So that's bad. That means something bad, I think. So you said you like local coffee shops, but does local mean wherever you are or where you are right now? And where are you right now?
Yeah, so I'm currently in Miami Beach, and this is my second year living here. I moved here in 2019 for this conducting fellowship with New World Symphony, and so there's a great little spot called XO Coffee that is one block away from the hall, so it's perfect for the breaks in between rehearsals when you just have a few minutes and you're in a hurry. But before that, I spent 8 years in San Francisco, which is a mecca of, so to speak, of coffee. It's just astounding the variety that's there and how deeply people care about it. And so I had incredible coffee on a daily basis when I was living there.
Yeah. I haven't been to Miami or San Francisco in years, but man, you're lucky to have lived in two really beautiful, exciting cities.
It's surreal. So I grew up in Baltimore, which I enjoy. I think Baltimore's a wonderful town. And then I went to school in Rochester at Eastman, which also a very charming place. But when I moved to San Francisco, it was the first city I fell in love with, and it was just fortunate enough that I was able to stay there as long as I did. I moved there for grad school and stayed out there after school and was able to build a career performing music for years, and then I got this incredible opportunity of this position in Miami, and I moved here. And yeah, it's strange because both cities, Miami Beach in particular where I live, it's not just Miami, but Miami Beach and San Francisco are just tourist destinations. Like people save up for long periods of time to be able to travel to these places, and like I've been a local in both, so it's like really incredible to be in these places that have such appeal and bring in such a variety of people from all over the world. It's fascinating.
Yeah, I'll bet. I lived in Los Angeles and New York and DC, and I used to have people visiting all the time. Not me, just and they wanted to crash at my place. Now I live in Kansas, not so much anymore.
Yeah.
So if you get tired of visitors, I got some suggestions for places.
Sounds good.
Now only, well, actually, I should say now only the people who really want to visit me come visit me. That's nice.
There you go. There you go.
Is it a coincidence that you lived in San Francisco and Miami? Those are the two places that Michael Tilson Thomas works or has been working. Is that just a coincidence, or did you have some connection to him somehow?
Well, it's such a funny story because several years ago, starting in 2018, I was hired as an assistant conductor to do, cover work and assistant work with San Francisco Symphony. But I was only hired to work with guest conductors, so I actually never crossed paths with MTT.
Okay.
While living in San Francisco, we never got to work together. I was always working with the symphony on weeks that he was not in town. We didn't have that connection really coming into this. So it's just by chance, in a sense, that I ended up getting to come, and find myself here in Miami. But I worked with his symphony in San Francisco, but never with him with that symphony.
Yeah. Now, do you work with him closely there in Miami? I mean, do you see him frequently?
Yeah, yeah, and we're on the phone, quite a bit. It's still very surreal to me. I grew up just absolutely just idolizing his recordings. He's just such an incredible output, and then when I got into conducting, just I would just watch every video I could of an interview with him, just hearing him speak about music. He's just, it's another level of thinking, of perception, of analysis, and so just getting to work with him is really extraordinary. And like last season, part of this conducting fellowship is that I get to split concerts with MTT or some guest conductors. So I'll conduct the overture, and then he takes the concerto and the symphony. But for those programs, he'll sit in on my rehearsals. Literally, he would sit in the back of the violin section and just watch the rehearsals, and occasionally chime in with something, whether it's I know for he would chime in with something, whether it's for the orchestra or whether it was for me to try. But he does it in a way that is so respectful. As you know, there's such a fine line when, like, in a workshop or a master class or any kind of setting where it's easy to chop someone down on the podium, and then like the orchestra loses respect and you feel instantly the dynamic shifts. And MTT has this incredibly elegant way of going about it, where it's such an encouraging environment. And if he makes a suggestion for me, Chad, why don't you try that and give a little extra subdivision on beat 3 and 4? I think that's going to clean it up. Or he might even make a comment directly to one of the musicians. It feels like we're in it together. So I get to learn. Yeah, I basically get these one-on-one master classes, if you want to consider that, while I happen to be running rehearsals, and then we share the performance. So
Anyway,
it's super
amazing.
special.
And you get to live in Miami.
And I get to live in Miami. It's so true.
Yeah, but you said you're from Baltimore originally, or did you just go to school?
I'm from
Where are
Baltimore.
you from?
Grew up in Baltimore, and that's where I got my start in music. And I was a trumpet player, and I still play as well. And I do some teaching on the side here and there, particularly through the pandemic. I reached out to former students and said, hey, I have more time right now. If you're interested, and so I've kept up with playing, and that's been a really fulfilling component of the last year, to be honest. When we weren't performing, was the ability to still create music in some capacity.
I'm a guitarist, and I hadn't practiced guitar seriously and consistently in, like, I don't know, 15 years. I still play a little bit from time to time, but it was nice last summer. I was last summer and fall. I was putting in like 3 hours a day. It was like being back in school, back in my undergrad. It was great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you realize how bad you are if you don't practice for a while. And then after a couple of weeks or months, you realize how much better you are. And you're like, wow, practice really works.
Yeah, I feel like for me, it's been funny, out of, like, as the years go on, and now I'm really, my life's dedicated to conducting. I'm obviously touching the trumpet far less frequently, but in some ways my playing is better than it's ever been, in the sense that I think I approach the instrument from a much more relaxed space. My breathing is way, way better, way more consistent. I have significantly less tension. And obviously it's because I don't have well, you can call it baggage or whatever. I don't have that need to like win an audition on the instrument like I was, had like sort of up here in the back of my head for all those years that I was pursuing, my life in trumpet. And so it's just funny because it's like the number of hours have of practice on the trumpet have just gone down exponentially. But I think the focus that comes with it, and the musicality and shaping and nuance, is in some ways higher. Of course, my endurance is shot. Like 10 solid minutes of playing. And I used to be able to just go on and on and on, and it's like that doesn't happen. That went, but I feel like musically, it's at a very satisfying level when I do
Yeah,
play.
me too. I think I'm playing really musically, but where speed is concerned, I mean, my technical things are kind of shot. But
Yeah, I feel your pain.
Oh, that's great. And so I was going to ask what you've been doing to fill your time during the pandemic. But first of all, I see you conducted concerts recently, so you're still doing your main thing. And then also you've got these short videos you've been putting on Facebook. You're calling them unsolicited advice, I think.
Yeah, yeah. So it's been, you know, a strange time as it has been for everyone in the performing industry, or every industry, let's be honest, over the last year. Um, the until I did just start conducting again in February last month. Was the first time back conducting, and before that, the last show was March 7th. You know, I feel like we all have that in the back of our minds, like that very specific, the last concert or the last rehearsal. So for me, final performance of 2020 was March 7th, 2020, and I did not get to perform again until February, until second week of February. It's incredible to be back. It's strange, you know. Like all the other orchestras who are performing right now in the States, the guidelines and protocols that are being followed with distancing, and our wind players have shields not only on the sides of them but in front, and so it's taken very seriously, which is great because this, you know, safety and security is just like everything right now during this pandemic. But it adds all these new layers of challenges, you know, for listening, for balancing, for cohesion, and so it's, you know, it's different, you know, approaching music during this period. I don't know if you felt that same way. It's a different experience. I'm having to prioritize things like yeah, like lining things up, or just, you know, isolating when, you know, let's say French horn and cello have the melody together, and just going, okay, just so you two can hear each other, because when we have everyone back in with the distancing, with the shields, it's probably not going to be possible. So I'm focusing on these smaller things that I maybe wouldn't have spent as much time on with New World last season, you know, pre-pandemic, and now I have, you know, have to, you know, sort of reprioritize how I structure rehearsal.
Yeah, I'm working at a university in Topeka, and we're socially distanced. We have smaller numbers. The orchestra used to be about 50, and now it's 22.
Yeah.
So repertoire is hard to choose repertoire, the right repertoire for that group of people and that instrumentation. And then we're all sitting far away from each other with masks on, and they don't all have cages around them, but I've got a cage around me, so I can't hear them, they can't hear me. It's quite terrible, actually. But I try to stay optimistic because I know that a lot of people aren't getting even that. A lot of universities and especially high schools and middle schools, they're doing online band and orchestra. I can't imagine what that's like. It's
Yeah.
not, I mean, it's not a thing. Online orchestra is not a thing.
No, exactly. This, it needs to be. We need to have live interaction. You know, we need to be in the same
Yeah.
space. So I'm in the same boat. It's just like being really thankful that I'm now able to make music again, and you know, we're sharing it virtually. You know, of course, everything, you know, we're recording and streaming online. So it's great to be back, but you know, that space the in between of AKA 2020. You know,
Right.
what was I doing when I wasn't conducting? And so for me, I went through sort of very interesting phases. At the start, I took a little bit of a break. I wasn't studying anywhere near as heavily as what I would have been doing any other year of my life. Um, and I sort of found myself going through, exploring other art forms. And looking back, I realized I actually went through about these 2 month periods of sort of obsessing about something new. So the first 2 months, March and April, I was really, really committed to reading a lot of poetry and writing a lot of poetry, which is something I had done
Sure.
just for fun in the past. But I started doing some writing. I started submitting to like journals, poetry journals, just I had time, you know, and I was just like, why not? You know, I'm not doing this for a career, but it would be fun. How cool would that be? And I actually had a few works that were published by small publications, and so it was like really wild to have that happen. And then I got into studying a lot more visual arts and painting, particularly 20th, 21st century artists. And I did some painting for the first time in my life, actually. And I did a series of about 12 works that were sort of taken through the lens of a musician. I did a whole series of works that are take words that can only be spelled on the music staff, and doing, you know, paintings based on them. And I would paint that, you know, paint the notes out onto a staff at some on some surface of the canvas or paper. And so it was really interesting. So I had all of these things going on, just sort of to busy myself, to keep myself creatively engaged. As I mentioned, I started teaching trumpet again. So I have a few students I teach over Zoom. Um, and then I was like, I want to be productive still as a conductor during this time. So I basically gave myself homework. I should spend more time with Brahms' Third Symphony. So I'll spend the next, 2 weeks on this first movement. Or, I just picked repertoire, both some that I had spent, maybe I had covered for, and, I'd learned just enough about, but never dove deep into, or works I had never studied. And I just forced myself in a way. I mean, that sounds strong to say forced, but I assigned it to myself and said, I'm going to spend the next month on this music. And so I was able to do that. But, I imagine you, through all the conversations you've had with other guests and just other conductors, it's been challenging. I know a lot of people who have just struggled with the motivation to study. Why study Alpine Symphony when the realities of getting on stage with an orchestra of that size might still be another, year away, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So,
I've heard all the whole gamut of things I've done during the pandemic, and it's funny because before I have each of these conversations, I do a little chat like I did with you, like, what do you want to talk about? What do you want to know? Yeah. And then everybody ultimately ends up going to the pandemic at some point in the conversation, and we're all tired of talking about it and thinking,
of course,
but it's what we're all doing right now. But conductors have either taken one tack or the other. They've either like immersed themselves in study, or they've relaxed and rested.
Yeah.
I did a little bit of both, but one thing that's true about conductors when there's not a pandemic is we're overly busy all the time, and constantly saying, I wish I had time to study this. I wish I had time to practice. I wish I had time to sleep. I wish I had time to visit my friends. Now we have time, or at least we have. It's starting to get busier now, which I'm happy about. But I like the whole month of June last year. My goal was to sleep 8 hours every night. That was a weird goal, but I did it. I felt like $1,000,000 because it had been years. And,
incredible.
Yeah.
I think for many people, I had sort of some similar goals in just healthier lifestyle, slowing things down. Of course, with the pandemic came a period, well, the longest period of my life where I've cooked with this level of consistency. I've just it's been incredible. I've also found in the last year that I've become a lot more aware of personal finance, and what do I need or not need in my life when it comes to spending. And of course, I'm not going out to eat, I'm not doing all this, so I was cooking everything, which of course was saving me a lot of money. So it sort of really made me hyper aware of where I was, before this. And so it sort of helped me reprioritize things, both financially, physically. Sleeping consistently, not waking up to alarms every day, it was really extraordinary. And just having time to exercise. I see you have a nice looking bike behind you. Do you ride consistently? Is that a big part of your life? Or
well, the weather here has been terrible, so I had to buy a trainer. But yeah, right now it's up on a trainer, and I try to get on a couple times a week. Yeah, because I used to go to the gym pretty frequently. I'm not a gym rat or anything like that, but I would go a couple times a week, and you can't go to gyms anymore. And in the dead of winter, at least, okay, so you live in Miami, you can run anytime, but in the dead of winter in Kansas, it's not easy to go for a run when it's 10 degrees or something like that. So it's been a struggle to like do fitness stuff.
Yeah, I imagine. Yeah, that's definitely the luxury of being here, in Miami. And, before that in San Francisco, where the weather is so even keeled and, always feels like autumn. It was just, I got into cycling when I was there. It's such, once again, a place that's just embraces it so much. Yeah. Oh my God. What a workout. Biking in that town is unforgiving. But it puts things in perspective. I remember when I was visiting my family back in Baltimore a few years ago for Thanksgiving, and I went riding with a neighbor, and he lent me an extra road bike, and I had not done any like real riding outside of San Francisco. And I remember just feeling like I could do this all day, like I'm literally biking up mountains. A ride in San Francisco means you're gonna hurt, like there's just no way around it. it's going to be exhausting. And then when I got to a place where it was just flatter terrain, I was like, wow, this is a very different experience. Still super enjoyable, but yeah.
Yeah. A few years ago, I lived in Virginia Beach, and
Mhm.
Virginia Beach is sea level, of course, like San Francisco, but no hills. Virginia Beach is pretty flat.
Oh yeah.
And I was writing a lot when I lived in Virginia, and then I moved from Virginia to Boulder, Colorado. That almost killed me.
Oh
Like
my God.
just walking around, you're at 5,500 feet, so
Yeah.
the altitude is crazy different. And then you get on a bike or go for a run, and it's just you can't do it. So going from Boulder, Colorado to Kansas was a little bit easier, but
Yeah.
it's pretty flat here. There are hills.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't. You think of Kansas, you think of
Flat.
fields of corn, but there's some hills and stuff here, but it's not like Boulder or San Francisco for that matter.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. Well, do you have? But we're going to run out of time soon. But I wonder if I can solicit some unsolicited advice. Do you have any good advice for me and others who are watching?
Yeah. So yeah, it's funny. So through this pandemic as well, I've been focusing on a different sort of side of things I've cared about, which in addition to conducting has been teaching musicians sort of business and entrepreneurial skills to sort of thrive and just honestly make it in the world. As we know, it's such a tough field to make it as a musician, particularly when you're leaving conservatory, university, whatever. How do you transition into the real world? So this is something I've taught, given talks and lectures on over the last few years. I'm actually currently writing an ebook on the subject that's titled "You Earned a Music Degree, Now What?" And I thought, as a way to dive deeper into this, I would hold myself accountable to just come up with just sort of pieces of advice, whether that I've experienced, things I've learned either the easy way, where I got it right the first time, or the hard way, and just share these things, across my social media channels. And they're just 30 seconds or less of just like one thing that you can do, and it can be everything from tips on maximizing efficiency in your practicing, incorporating singing into what you're doing, being more aware of your finances. It's just everything that could have some sort of impact on your career, in a positive way. I've been trying to share these and hold myself accountable for filming one every day. And it's a great challenge, and it feels, really satisfying. And it's already, oddly enough, or maybe not oddly enough, it's led to some opportunities to speak with, at conservatories, and doing all these Zoom calls with students, to sort of just give my thoughts on how do you start an ensemble. That's actually where I got my sort of conducting start after grad school. I founded my own group in San Francisco called Elevate Ensemble, and I ran it for 5 seasons. And so, I'll talk about how do you start a group, how do you advertise a show, how do you book a venue, all of these different things. And so it's been super rewarding for me, and it feels like a nice way of giving back to the community, and just sort of better training younger musicians in particular on like what they should be expecting in the future, and what they should expect of themselves. Because I think so often we leave school thinking I'll win a job, but that's few and far between. So it's how do you make it as a freelancer? How do you get a first gig in a new city? Like one little tidbit I'll share is like I talk about reaching out to the personnel managers of the local regional orchestras, because obviously if you want to sub with an orchestra, playing for the principal player in the section, great way to go. But it's not the only way. Getting to know the personnel manager who actually does the hiring, crucial. And I actually got my first professional trumpet playing gig, orchestra gig out of grad school by reaching out to every personnel manager of every orchestra within, I think, a 100-mile radius is what I did. Introduced myself, included my resume, said I'm available. I got called last minute to sub for a rehearsal. It was not even for the full set. It was just come for a pop rehearsal, third trumpet. And I drove up to Napa, played it, did the part, did it well enough, and they started calling me, and I started playing with them consistently. So little things like that can have a big impact on sort of getting someone off, up and running. And so I'm just hoping to sort of teach that more along the way as I continue building a career and life in conducting too.
Yeah. Well, I think it's great that you're sharing those little bits of information. I watched a bunch of your videos, and the delightful thing is they're just 30 seconds. So it's not hard to find time to watch a few. In fact, after I started watching them, I had a hard time stopping. It's like, oh, here's another one. Oh, here's another one. Here's another one, which is different from like, oh, I found this great podcast. 48 minutes. You got to be kidding. I'll do it later. So it was really
Yeah.
easy to take advice from you. But thanks for having coffee with me. It's really nice to meet you.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. I'm so glad we were able to do this. Thank you again.
Well, I hope that one day we'll get to meet in person, have a coffee at XO maybe.
Yeah. Oh, it'll be great. Looking forward to that day
Right.
for sure.
Thanks, Chad. Have a good day.
You as well.